They say the loneliest sound in the world isn't silence, it's a birthday song that no one sings for you. I never believed that until the night I turned 35. My name is Adrian Moretti, and if you asked anyone in New York who I was, they would lower their voice before answering. Newspapers called me a billionaire investor. Politicians called me a generous donor. My enemies called me the man they prayed never to meet. The truth sat somewhere between those stories, wrapped inside expensive Italian suits, armored SUVs, and a reputation that had taken half my life to build. My estate overlooked the Hudson River, a place so large that the marble floors echoed beneath every footstep. Crystal chandeliers reflected warm golden light across a dining room designed for 50 guests. A string quartet had been hired weeks ago. The chef prepared enough food to serve a luxury wedding. Every place setting held polished silver, imported china, and crystal glasses waiting to be filled. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked alive. But the chairs stayed empty. One by one, the staff quietly cleared untouched appetizers while pretending not to notice the clock creeping toward 9. My assistant approached with careful steps, his expression as measured as always. "Mr. Moretti, should I ask the musicians to continue?" I glanced across the endless table before shaking my head. No. They packed their instruments without complaint. The last violin note faded into the enormous house until only the ticking grandfather clock remained. Funny how a mansion worth more than most neighborhoods could suddenly feel smaller than a studio apartment. Wealth buys almost everything except the one thing people freely give. I poured myself another cup of black coffee instead of champagne. Birthdays had stopped feeling like celebrations years ago. They had become reminders. Reminders that respect and affection were never the same thing. Men would stand between me and danger without hesitation, but none of them would sit across from me simply because they wanted to. Outside, cold rain painted silver streaks across the tall windows. Beyond the security gates, headlights occasionally passed, before disappearing into the night. Inside, dozens of security cameras watched every hallway while a team of highly trained guards quietly rotated through their positions. My world was protected from every imaginable threat except loneliness. I reached for the small birthday cake resting in the center of the table. It was almost laughable. A single candle flickered in the middle, its tiny flame dancing against the polished silver tray beneath it. I didn't bother making a wish. Wishes belong to people who believe tomorrow could surprise them. I leaned forward, ready to blow out the candle, when 3 soft knocks echoed through the front door. Every guard in the house froze. Earpieces crackled. Footsteps moved with disciplined precision beyond the hallway. Nobody visited my home without permission. Nobody. One of the guards looked toward me, silently waiting for instructions. I should have told him to send whoever it was away. Instead, something about those gentle little knocks made me curious. They weren't desperate. They weren't demanding. They sounded hopeful. "Open the door," I said quietly. The massive oak door slowly swung inward. Standing beneath the porch light was a tiny little girl wearing a bright yellow raincoat almost too big for her. Raindrops clung to her blonde curls as she hugged a small paper gift bag against her chest with both hands. She couldn't have been older than 6. She smiled as though she'd found exactly the house she had been searching for, looked straight into my eyes without the slightest hint of fear, and asked in the sweetest voice I'd ever heard, "Excuse me, mister, is today your birthday?" For a moment, I simply stared at her. Not because she was standing outside one of the most heavily guarded homes in the city, and not because every member of my security team looked ready to escort her away with polite efficiency. I stared because she smiled at me the way children smile at ordinary people. There was no hesitation in her bright blue eyes. No fear. No recognition. Just simple curiosity. I realized several seconds had passed before I finally answered. "Yes," I said softly. "Today is my birthday." Her face lit up like Christmas morning. "I knew it," she exclaimed, holding the little paper bag a little higher. "Mama said birthdays are not supposed to be lonely." Behind her, another voice called through the rain. "Lily." Lily, where are you? A young woman hurried through the open gate, completely out of breath, clutching an umbrella that had turned inside out from the wind. She could not have been much older than 29. Her light brown hair was damp from the rain, and she wore a simple blue jacket over faded jeans, the kind of clothes people wore after finishing a long day at work. She stopped the instant she noticed the guards, then her eyes met mine. Every bit of color disappeared from her face. "I am so sorry," she said quickly, reaching for her daughter. "She slipped away while I was paying for groceries. She saw your house decorated with lights and guessed someone was having a birthday. We will leave immediately." Lily pulled gently away from her mother's hand. "But Mama, I did not give him the present yet." Emily looked completely embarrassed. "Lily, that is enough." I watched the little girl hold the paper bag against her chest as though it contained something priceless. She looked up at me again. "Can I still give it to you? I made it myself." I had accepted watches worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Paintings from Europe. Rare bottles of wine older than I was. Somehow none of them had ever made me curious. This tiny paper bag did. I nodded. I would be honored. She skipped up the front steps before any guard could react. One of my security men instinctively stepped forward, but I raised a hand, stopping him. Lily carefully placed the bag into my hands as though she trusted me completely. Inside was a folded birthday card made from pink construction paper, decorated with uneven stars, smiling balloons, and a sun wearing sunglasses. Tucked beside it was a chocolate chip cookie wrapped in clear plastic with a small yellow ribbon. Across the front of the card, written in large crooked letters with colorful markers, were the words, "Happy birthday to the nice man in the big house." I felt something tighten in my chest. It had been years since anyone had made something with their own hands just because they wanted to. Emily looked horrified. "I am truly sorry." She has always believed every person deserves a birthday present. She insisted we stop after seeing the lights. I tried to explain that people do not usually knock on strangers' doors. I looked from the car to the exhausted young mother standing in the rain. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes, and the grocery bags hanging from one arm suggested she had come straight from work before picking up her daughter. She looked tired in the way only single parents did, carrying responsibilities that never seemed to end. Lily tilted her head. "Do you like cookies?" I smiled before I even realized I was doing it. "Very much." She grinned with obvious relief. "Good. I helped bake that one." The rain continued falling around us, but for the first time that entire evening, I no longer noticed the cold. I noticed the warmth standing on my front porch instead. I looked toward Emily and quietly asked, "Would the two of you join me for a slice of birthday cake? There is far too much for one person, and I think birthdays should never end with empty chairs." Emily hesitated long enough for me to believe she would politely refuse. Her fingers tightened around the grocery bags while she glanced toward the quiet street behind her, then back at Lily, whose hopeful eyes made resistance almost impossible. She gave me a small apologetic smile. "We really should not impose." I looked around the enormous entrance hall behind me, its polished marble reflecting the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. "You would not be imposing. You would be rescuing me from eating enough cake to last an entire week." Lily giggled. "Mama, we cannot let him eat all that cake by himself." Emily sighed the way only a mother could when she already knew she had lost the argument. "Just one slice," she said gently. "Then we will go home." I stepped aside and welcomed them in. The moment Lily crossed the doorway, her eyes became as wide as the chandeliers above us. She slowly turned in a full circle, taking in the sweeping staircase, the grand piano, and the towering windows that overlooked the rain-covered gardens. "This place is bigger than my whole school," she whispered. One of my security guards almost smiled before quickly remembering himself. I noticed it because smiles were rare in this house. Emily carefully wiped the rain from Lily's shoes with a tissue before allowing her to walk farther inside. Even in someone else's home, she respected every detail. That simple gesture told me more about her character than any conversation could have. We entered the dining room where the untouched feast still covered the long table. Emily stopped in surprise. "You were expecting a lot of guests." "Apparently they had other plans," I answered with a calmness that surprised even me. She did not ask another question. She simply nodded, understanding that some disappointments did not need explanations. Lily climbed onto one of the oversized dining chairs, her little legs swinging beneath the seat as she stared at the enormous birthday cake. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Can we light the candle again?" I glanced toward the staff. Before I could speak, my head chef quietly stepped forward and relit the single candle without saying a word. The tiny flame flickered once more, filling the silent room with unexpected warmth. Lily folded her hands together. "Now you have to make a wish." I smiled faintly. I already missed my chance. She shook her head with complete confidence. "No, you did not. Wishes work until the candle goes out." I found myself laughing softly. It was not loud. It was not polished. It was simply real, and the sound seemed unfamiliar even to me. I closed my eyes for a brief moment. This time I did make a wish, although I would never admit it aloud. When I opened my eyes, I gently blew out the candle. Lily clapped with genuine excitement as though I had accomplished something remarkable. Emily watched quietly, her expression softer now than when she first arrived. The staff began serving dessert, but Lily immediately noticed the untouched dinner spread across the table. "Did nobody eat?" she asked. I shook my head. "Not until now." Without hesitation, she picked up a fork and took one careful bite of cake before smiling with complete approval. "Birthdays taste better when people eat together." The sentence was so simple that nobody spoke for several seconds. Even the staff seemed to pause. Emily looked embarrassed. "She says whatever comes into her mind." "Please do not apologize," I replied. It has been a long time since someone said exactly what I needed to hear. As we shared cake, the conversation slowly became easier. Lily told me about first grade, about her favorite library books, and about the stray orange cat she wanted to adopt someday. Emily spoke little, but every time Lily laughed, I noticed the exhaustion in her face softened just enough to reveal the woman beneath years of responsibility. I realized I had spent almost 2 hours at that table without checking my phone once, without discussing business once, and without thinking about the empty chairs that had surrounded me only a short while earlier. Somehow, the largest room in my home no longer felt empty. It felt alive. After dessert, Lily wandered toward the enormous living room with the careful curiosity only children seem to possess. She stopped beside a grand piano polished so perfectly that the ceiling lights shimmered across its surface like stars on still water. "Can I look?" she asked, turning toward me before touching anything. "Of course," I replied. She climbed onto the piano bench, pressing a single key so softly that the quiet note floated through the house before fading into silence. "It sounds lonely," she whispered. I smiled at the unexpected observation. "Why do you think that?" She shrugged. "Because nobody plays with it." Emily let out a quiet laugh. "She has a habit of giving feelings to everything." "Sometimes she is more accurate than adults," I answered. Lily wandered from one room to another, never running, never grabbing expensive decorations, simply admiring everything with genuine wonder. She paused in front of a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the gardens where rain still painted silver lines across the stone paths. "The flowers will be happy tomorrow," she said. "Rain helps them grow." Emily folded her arms, watching her daughter with a tired but loving smile. She notices little things that most people walk past. I found myself watching them instead of the gardens. The house had always been filled with beautiful objects collected from around the world, yet none of them had ever changed the atmosphere the way one curious child had in less than an hour. My assistant quietly approached and leaned close enough that only I could hear him. "Sir, your 9:30 meeting has arrived." Without taking my eyes off Lily, I answered, "Reschedule it." He blinked in surprise. "Tonight?" "Yes." He nodded once before disappearing without another question. Emily looked at me apologetically. Please do not rearrange your evening because of us. It was not an important meeting, I said, and for the first time in years, that statement felt completely true. Lily suddenly turned around and looked directly at me. Can I ask you something? Anything. Do you always eat dinner by yourself? The question landed gently, but it still reached places inside me that years of business negotiations never could. I thought about giving the polite answer. Instead, I told the truth. Most nights, yes. She frowned as though I had described something terribly unfair. That is sad. Emily immediately stepped in. Lily. What? She asked innocently. It is sad. I could not argue with her. Before I could respond, she continued. I thought maybe you had a really big family because your house is so big. I slowly shook my head. No. It is just me. She studied my face with complete sincerity. Children often looked at adults without judgment, only curiosity. Then she smiled. Well, now tonight it is 3 people. The words were simple, but they settled over the room with surprising weight. Emily lowered her eyes, perhaps embarrassed by how naturally her daughter spoke, but I was not embarrassed. I was grateful. Grateful because no adult had managed to make this house feel less empty in years. Lily walked toward one of the bookshelves lining the far wall. Hundreds of leather-bound volumes filled the shelves from floor to ceiling. She pointed to a framed photograph sitting by itself in the corner. Is that your daddy? She asked. I picked up the picture and looked at the familiar face staring back at me. Yes. That was taken a long time ago. He looks kind. I smiled faintly. He was. She nodded as though she had confirmed something important. My mama says kind people never really leave. They just live inside the people they loved. Emily looked genuinely surprised. I do not remember saying it like that. Lily grinned. Maybe I made it prettier. I looked at the little girl standing beneath shelves filled with books, expensive art, and priceless antiques, and realized the most valuable thing in my home had walked through the front door carrying a handmade birthday card. I had spent years believing influence changed lives. That evening, a 6-year-old was quietly proving that kindness could accomplish something power never could. The grandfather clock struck 10, and for the first time that evening I found myself wishing the night would slow down instead of ending. Emily glanced at the antique clock and quietly stood from her chair. We should get Lily home. She has school in the morning. Lily looked up with the unmistakable disappointment only children expressed so honestly. Already? Emily smiled gently. Already? I walked them toward the front entrance while one of the housekeepers quietly packed several untouched desserts into a small white bakery box. Emily immediately noticed. That is really not necessary. It would be a shame to let good cake go to waste, I replied. Please take it. She hesitated for a moment before accepting it with genuine gratitude. Thank you. As we reached the front door, Lily suddenly stopped walking. She turned around and looked at me with the serious expression she always wore whenever she believed something important needed to be said. Can I tell you a secret? I leaned down slightly. I am listening. She lowered her voice to a whisper even though everyone could still hear her. You smile more than when we got here. I laughed softly. Do I? She nodded with complete certainty. Much more. Emily brushed a loose curl away from Lily's face. Sometimes children notice things adults miss. Before I could answer, headlights swept across the front driveway. A dark grey sedan rolled slowly past the entrance gates. Before continuing down the quiet street. It did not stop, but Emily instinctively became tense. It was subtle. Most people would never have noticed. I did. Years of reading expressions had taught me that fear rarely announced itself loudly. It revealed itself in tightened shoulders, shorter breaths, and eyes that checked exits without realizing they were doing it. Emily quickly forced a smile. It is probably nothing. I had not asked a question, yet she had already offered an answer. That told me enough. Lily reached for her mother's hand. "Mama." Emily squeezed it reassuringly. "Everything is fine, sweetheart." I watched the sedan disappear through the rain before turning my attention back to Emily. "Are you certain?" She nodded almost too quickly. "Just a misunderstanding from earlier this week. Someone has been calling about an old financial matter that has nothing to do with you. I will handle it." She tried to sound calm, but exhaustion made honesty difficult to hide. I respected her decision not to explain further. Everyone deserved the dignity of choosing when to share their burdens. Instead, I opened my coat closet and removed a large navy umbrella with a carved wooden handle. I handed it to her. "Keep this. The forecast says the rain will continue until morning." She looked at the umbrella before looking back at me. "I cannot take something this nice." "Then think of it as a birthday favor." After a brief pause, she accepted it with another quiet thank you. Lily hugged the bakery box against her chest as though it contained treasure. "We are going to eat cake for breakfast," she announced proudly. Emily laughed. "Absolutely not. Maybe just one tiny bite." "Still no." Their playful conversation echoed down the front steps while several guards discreetly opened the gate. I stood beneath the porch light watching them walk toward the sidewalk together, one small figure skipping happily beside a mother carrying groceries, cake, and an umbrella she had not expected to bring home. They looked ordinary in every possible way, yet something about that ordinary life felt extraordinary to me. One of my senior security officers quietly approached after they disappeared around the corner. "Would you like us to verify that they arrive home safely?" he asked. I looked toward the rain-soaked street for several silent seconds before answering. "Do it discreetly. They are guests, not subjects of an investigation. I only want to know they are safe." "Understood, sir." As he walked away, I glanced down at the handmade birthday card still resting in my hand. Across the colorful paper, one sentence caught my attention again. "Happy birthday to the nice man in the big house." I had spent years carefully shaping the image the world saw whenever they heard my name. Yet somehow the opinion that mattered most had been written in purple marker by a 6-year-old who knew nothing about power, wealth, or reputation. I had no way of knowing that before the next sunrise, the quiet lives of that mother and daughter would cross mine again in a way none of us could have imagined. I barely slept that night. It was not because of unfinished business or market reports waiting on my desk. It was because every time I closed my eyes, I saw a little girl proudly holding a handmade birthday card as though kindness was the most natural thing in the world. By 6 o'clock the next morning, I was already standing beside the floor-to-ceiling windows in my study with a cup of black coffee. Rain had finally stopped, leaving the gardens washed clean beneath the pale morning sun. My chief of security entered exactly on time, carrying a slim folder. "Good morning, sir." I nodded toward the chair across from my desk. "Tell me." He opened the folder without unnecessary drama. "Miss Emily Carter and her daughter arrived home safely last night at 10:43. However, there is something else you should know." His tone immediately caught my attention. "Go on." "Over the past several days, a man has been appearing near their apartment building." I remained silent. "He has not entered the building or approached the child directly, but neighbors report frequent arguments outside. Local authorities have responded twice. No arrests were made." I looked down at the single photograph clipped inside the folder. It showed Emily unlocking the entrance to an aging brick apartment building while Lily stood beside her holding a backpack almost as large as she was. 50 feet away stood a man with his hands in his pockets, watching from across the street. Nothing threatening appeared in the photograph. Yet something about the distance between them felt wrong. "Who is he?" I asked. "Daniel Brooks. 34 years old. Emily's former partner. According to public records, they separated nearly 3 years ago. There is an ongoing disagreement regarding financial responsibilities and visitation requests." My eyes remained on the photograph. Has he broken any laws? Not that we can verify. I slowly closed the folder. Then we will not interfere. My security chief looked slightly surprised. Understood. After he left, I kept thinking about the expression Emily had worn when the grey sedan passed my gates the night before. She had not looked angry. She had looked tired. There was a difference. A few hours later, I was leaving a downtown charity board meeting when my driver stopped at a red light outside a neighborhood shopping district. I glanced absent-mindedly through the window until a familiar yellow raincoat caught my eye. Lily stood outside a small bookstore, pressing her hands against the display window while Emily compared prices at a nearby produce stand. They looked exactly as they had the night before. Ordinary. Peaceful. Real. Before I could say anything, Lily suddenly turned toward the street. Her face brightened with immediate recognition. She waved both arms enthusiastically. Mr. Adrian. I could not stop myself from smiling. My driver looked into the rearview mirror with obvious confusion. Do you know them, sir? Yes, I answered quietly. Open the door. Emily looked genuinely surprised as I stepped onto the sidewalk. What are the chances? She asked with a warm smile. Lily ran over holding a children's library book against her chest. Look what I got. She proudly showed me a book about famous bridges across America. I want to build things when I grow up. I knelt beside her. That is an excellent dream. Emily looked almost embarrassed. She checks out a different book every week. Books are always a good investment, I replied. Lily suddenly looked up at me with complete seriousness. Did you eat breakfast today? I laughed softly. Yes. With people. The question caught me completely off guard. I admitted the truth. No. By myself. She frowned in disappointment. We still have work to do then. Emily covered her face for a second, laughing despite herself. I promise she means well. I know, I answered. Looking at the two of them standing beneath the clear morning sky, I realized something had quietly changed inside me. For years I had measured success by buildings, numbers, and influence. Yet somehow, a mother carrying grocery bags and a little girl carrying library books had begun teaching me a completely different way to count what truly mattered. Over the next several weeks, something unexpected became part of my routine. Every Saturday morning, just before 10 o'clock, a familiar knock echoed through the front door of my estate. It was never loud. Never impatient. 3 gentle knocks followed by Lily's cheerful voice asking if I was home. My staff stopped looking surprised after the 3rd visit. Even the security team, who had spent years treating every unexpected arrival as a potential concern, began greeting her with warm smiles. She knew several of them by name before the month was over. Emily always apologized the moment she stepped inside. I promise we are not trying to make this a habit. I always answered the same way. I hope it becomes one. One bright Saturday afternoon, Lily marched into the living room carrying a colorful paper bag and wearing an expression that suggested she had important business to conduct. Close your eyes, she ordered. I obeyed without argument. Do not peek. I would not dream of it. I heard the sound of paper crinkling, followed by tiny footsteps circling around me. Okay. Open them. Sitting on the coffee table was a crooked blue paper crown covered with glitter stars and handwritten stickers. Across the front, in oversized silver letters, she had written, "Birthday King." I looked from the paper crown to Lily, who stood with her hands behind her back, waiting nervously. You made this. She nodded. Enthusiastically. Last night. Mama helped with the glitter because I accidentally spilled it everywhere. Emily laughed from across the room. We are still finding glitter in the kitchen. Lily picked up the paper crown and held it toward me. You forgot to wear one on your birthday. I accepted it carefully, almost afraid I might damage it. Do you really think it belongs on my head? She placed both hands on her hips. Absolutely. For perhaps the first time in their careers, several members of my security team looked completely speechless. One of them quietly looked toward the floor, clearly hiding a smile. I placed the paper crown on my head exactly as Lily instructed. The room became completely silent for one brief second before Lily burst into delighted laughter. "It fits," she announced proudly. Emily covered her mouth, unable to stop smiling. "I cannot believe you actually did that." I reached up and adjusted the slightly crooked crown. I have been given much more expensive gifts. None of them came with instructions this clear. Even my housekeeper laughed softly as she passed through the hallway. The atmosphere inside the estate felt lighter than I could ever remember. Lily climbed onto the sofa beside me and leaned comfortably against my shoulder as though she had known me for years. She looked up with thoughtful eyes. "You look happier now." "That seems to be your specialty," I replied. She thought about that for a moment before asking the question that completely stopped time. "Can I call you Mr. Birthday forever?" I smiled. "I think I would like that very much." She grinned with relief, then quietly added, "Maybe, someday, if it makes Mama smile too, could I call you Dad?" The room fell completely still. No one moved. No one spoke. Emily's eyes widened in surprise before immediately filling with emotion she tried hard to hide. My own heartbeat seemed louder than the silence around us. Lily looked back and forth between us, suddenly worried she had said something wrong. "I am sorry," she whispered. "I just thought every family should have somebody to celebrate birthdays with." I looked into the innocent eyes of a little girl who had unknowingly reached the one place no business rival, reporter, or powerful leader had ever touched. Instead of answering with words, I gently placed my hand over hers. It was the only response I trusted myself to give, because somewhere deep inside, a future I had never allowed myself to imagine had quietly begun to feel possible. The question Lily asked stayed with me long after she and Emily returned home that afternoon. Some words disappeared as quickly as they were spoken. Others settled quietly into your heart and refused to leave. Hers belonged to the second kind. A few days later, I found myself standing outside the windows of a small neighborhood community center where Emily volunteered every Wednesday evening after finishing work. Through the glass, I watched her helping children with homework while Lily sat nearby coloring pictures with a box of worn crayons. She never noticed me at first. She was too busy encouraging a little boy who looked frustrated over a math assignment. She spoke with patience instead of pressure, smiling every time he solved another problem. It struck me that she spent her entire day taking care of people before returning home to take care of her daughter. When the children finally left, I walked inside carrying 2 paper cups of hot chocolate and 1 cup of black coffee. Emily looked surprised but smiled anyway. "You remembered I work here." "Lily told me," I admitted. Lily looked up from her drawing and immediately ran over. "Mr. Birthday." She hugged me without hesitation before accepting the hot chocolate with both hands. "You remembered my favorite." Some things are worth remembering. Emily accepted the coffee with a grateful smile. "Thank you." We sat together while Lily continued coloring at a nearby table. For several peaceful minutes, nobody spoke. Sometimes silence between the right people felt more comfortable than conversation. Finally, Emily broke the quiet. "I have been thinking a lot lately." I looked toward her. She kept her eyes on the steam rising from the coffee cup. "About us becoming part of your life." I waited without interrupting. "You have shown us kindness I never expected. Lily adores you." "I?" She stopped, searching for the right words. "I care about you more than I planned to." Hearing those words should have made me happy. Instead, I noticed worry behind every syllable. "But?" I asked gently. She exhaled slowly. "Your world is very different from ours. People know your name. They watch everything you do. Lily deserves a quiet childhood where she does not have to wonder why strangers recognize the man she cares about." I understood her concern before she finished speaking. It was not fear for herself. It was protection for her daughter. Are you thinking about leaving? I asked quietly. She nodded once, tears gathering despite her efforts to remain composed. There is a teaching position in another state. It is small, peaceful, and nobody there knows us. I have not accepted it yet, but I promise myself I would choose whatever gives Lily the safest future. Those words landed heavier than any business loss I had ever experienced. Before I could answer, Lily walked over carrying her newest drawing. It showed 3 stick figures standing beneath a bright yellow sun. One was labeled Mama. One was labeled me. The tallest one wore a blue paper crown. Look, she said proudly. It is our family picture. Emily closed her eyes for a brief moment, overcome with emotion. Lily looked between us, completely unaware of the difficult conversation she had interrupted. Mama, she asked softly, if we move away, who is going to have birthday cake with Mr. Birthday? Emily gently brushed a tear from her cheek but could not answer. Lily turned toward me instead. You told me birthdays are better when people eat together. If we leave, you will be all alone again. I looked into her innocent eyes and finally understood something I had spent years searching for. Every empire I had built could be replaced. Every fortune I had earned could disappear. But the chance to become part of a family that had chosen me without expecting anything in return was a gift that came only once in a lifetime. I set my coffee cup down, looked at Emily with complete sincerity, and quietly said, do not make your decision because of the life people think I have. Let me show you the life I truly want to build. 1 year later, the house looked different. The marble floors still reflected the morning sunlight. The gardens were still perfectly trimmed. The grand piano still stood beside the towering windows. Yet everything felt warmer, not because the building had changed, but because the people inside had. I stood in the kitchen instead of the formal dining room, wearing a simple sweater while unsuccessfully attempting to frost a birthday cake under the careful supervision of a 6-year-old who insisted she was now 7 and therefore an expert baker. Not like that, Lily laughed, reaching for the spatula. You have to spread it slowly. I surrendered immediately. Clearly I still need lessons. Emily stood nearby arranging fresh flowers in a small glass vase, smiling as she watched the two of us negotiate the proper way to decorate a cake. A year earlier, she had almost accepted the teaching job in another state. Instead, she had accepted something neither of us had expected. A future we built one ordinary day at a time. There had been no grand speeches. No dramatic promises. Just countless small choices. Breakfast together on Saturdays. Library visits with Lily. Volunteer evenings at the community center. Quiet dinners that slowly replaced lonely ones. Somewhere along the way, my enormous house had quietly become a home. Lily carefully placed 7 colorful candles on the cake before looking at me with complete seriousness. Remember your wish this time. I smiled. I do. She nodded approvingly. Good, because now you already have almost everything. Emily laughed softly. She has become very wise for 7. I learned from you, Lily answered without missing a beat. The doorbell rang. Lily hurried toward it before I could stop her. Moments later she returned carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers handed to her by one of the gardeners. These are for your birthday, she announced proudly. Everybody wanted to help. I accepted the flowers more carefully than I had ever accepted any expensive gift. Looking around the room, I noticed something I had never seen before. My staff was smiling openly. The housekeeper, the chef, the gardeners. Even members of my security team quietly gathered near the kitchen entrance. They were no longer employees attending another formal celebration. They looked like people happy to witness someone they cared about finding happiness of his own. Emily walked over and gently took my hand. Happy birthday, Adrian. Her voice carried the same quiet warmth that had first caught my attention the night she apologized for her daughter knocking on my door. Thank you, I whispered. For changing everything. She shook her head. Lily did that. We all gathered around the kitchen island instead of the grand dining table. The cake was not professionally decorated. The frosting leaned slightly to one side. Colorful sprinkles covered places they probably should not have. It was absolutely perfect. Lily lit the candles herself before folding her hands with excitement. "Okay," she said. "Now everybody sings." The kitchen filled with voices. Not polished voices. Not rehearsed voices. Just honest ones. When the last note faded away, I closed my eyes for a brief moment. 1 year earlier, I had wished for something I believed money could never buy. When I opened them again, Emily stood beside me holding my hand, Lily hugged my arm with complete confidence, and the people surrounding us looked less like employees and more like family. I blew out the candles in one gentle breath. Lily cheered louder than anyone. Then she wrapped her arms around my waist and looked up with the brightest smile I had ever seen. "See," she whispered. "Nobody should ever have a birthday alone." I looked around the room one final time and realized she had been right from the very beginning. Power could build walls high enough to protect a man from the world, but only kindness could open a door wide enough to let love walk in.